for everybody that's welcomed me back and has welcomed me. I'm going to stand in front of the counter because I feel like I'm trying to sell you something if I'm behind it. So I'll join you from up here. But thank you all for having me back. I love this side of the country. I'm from Maine, so I'm holding down the other side of the coastline, as far north, and you're as far south, coast to coast as we can get. So it's good to be back. So I appreciate that very much. All of my A Girl and a Gun ladies, raise your hand. If you're not familiar with the organization, I encourage you to look at it online. Gentlemen, too, check it out, because for all of the ladies in your life, it's an incredible resource that's available to everybody, regardless of age, abilities, or skills, or if you've never touched a firearm before. So you've got incredible resources locally to service that community, and I'm honored to be their director of training nationally. So for those of you who have not met me or heard my story, before I dive into the meat and potatoes of it, I'll tell you a little bit about who I am and why I'm here. I started shooting kind of serendipitously 8 years ago, and I can measure time because my son is 9, and I started shooting when he was 1. So that's the only way I can keep track. It's because of him. So it's a very useful tool. And I started shooting. I never thought I would be doing this. This was not my life path. I have a degree in fine art from Rhode Island School of Design. I come from a family of artists, musicians, engineers. That's what we did, and that's what we knew. And by accident, kind of, I fell into this space. I had a little girl and a little boy, that bewitching hour when they're 16 months apart, and you've got one on each hip, and they're screaming demons, and you love them when they're sleeping, that hour. We all know it. All of the parents in here know what that looks like. And my husband at the time came home and he looked at me and he said, "You need to get a hobby." And that's how many gentlemen end up sleeping on the couch, right? Well, the prompt was such that it was more of a, you need something for yourself. You need something that's yours, that's separate from this, that feeds your soul. So he didn't end up on the couch. However, it turned into a very expensive hobby very quickly. So he didn't know what he was signing me up for at the moment. But what I wanted to recreate for myself, not knowing anything about the shooting sports, I knew nothing. I didn't know there were competition sides of the house. My only experience had been from going duck hunting with my dad and my brothers. And in Maine, that means you're freezing and eating frozen peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in the duck blind in the wee hours of the morning and getting soaked to the bone. But somehow it was magical and it was fun. And it really didn't have anything to do with the guns. It had everything to do with the experience of sharing that moment with the two of them. And I wanted to recreate that as an adult. So, but I wanted to go not being the rookie. I didn't want to be babysat. I didn't want them to have to load my gear for me. I wanted to know how to be safe, take hunter safety, all of that stuff. So I signed up for a Women on Target NRA clinic. Has anyone ever experienced one of those classes? They're phenomenal, they're wonderful. Highly encourage you to check them out. And I was green, a pale shade of green, driving through the woods to this range that looked like something, out of a horror movie with the, falling down things. And I was a little nervous about the whole experience. But when I got there, every misconception that I had, every stereotype I expected to see and experience was gone. It was wonderful. Now, all the gentlemen that were there were wearing the bright orange trucker caps, had the Rip Van Winkle beards down to their belly buttons, big belt buckles, the flannel, the plaid, all of it. But they never called me sweetheart. They never belittled me. They never spoke down to me. And they fed us, and I'm Italian, so we're all about the food. If you're gonna feed me, I'm gonna show up, just FYI. They were amazing, and they squashed everything that I thought I was going to experience, and it was absolutely phenomenal. I fell in love with everything that had to do with the range experience, the culture of that community. I was with 25 other women who had never touched a gun either, and we all had an amazing experience. And that one day changed the entire course of my career. I'd been in the plastics injection molding industry and product design and development, actively designing and patenting products and bringing them to market my entire professional career. I sold off all my businesses. I was in automation design and all the cool nerdy stuff that makes the things and puts them together. Yeah, I'm super nerd. It's okay. I've embraced it. Sold off all of those business, all of those assets, and completely dove in continental shelf deep end style dive into an immersive training experience for the next 3 to 4 years. And followed that bouncing ball all over the country, learning from people who had information to answer questions that I needed answered, that couldn't be found in my backyard after I exhausted what Maine had to offer. So I had a very blessed learning path, and I'm still very blessed to work with some phenomenal Americans who've done great things on behalf of our country, who've mentored me and taught me along the way. And as a result of that journey, ended up being asked to give a private lesson. Or can you work with my wife and my daughter and my kids? And that turned into, hey, we'd like to have you join us for a full class. If we can get people together, would you like to come and take a class? I never ever thought 8 years ago that I'd be traveling the country teaching as my primary occupation. And I certainly never expected to be influencing educational curriculums for organizations like A Girl and a Gun, the NRA's programs, some youth programs nationally, and then as a consultant for different range curriculum all over the country. So it's been a phenomenal learning experience. And believe it or not, I use that fine art degree more often, and I'm very surprised at how often I use that material and that knowledge base. But that whole world has opened up a really interesting conversation. And that conversation is as a result of having an opportunity to travel coast to coast, border to border, and everywhere in the middle. So I have an opportunity through A Girl and a Gun to understand the women's across the nation's interests. And then through my own teaching programs, I get to experience what's going on regionally across the United States within any given year. So the needs and interests of the Northeast, where I'm from Maine, are radically different from those in Texas, which is totally different than here and completely different than Florida. For example, in Maine, the big concern we have right now from families is the fact that it's vacation land, and therefore we have an influx of population. In some towns, we have a 100% increase in population. And what that means is that the home invasions are spiking right now, whether people are home or not. So for our year-round residents, this is a very dangerous time of year. So their concerns and needs are very specific right now. What they're looking for knowledge, for gear, for equipment is very specific, and the need is very present in their minds. In Texas, I do a lot of work in Texas all over the state, and the difference is we're starting to have people followed to their homes from benign places like dropping their children off for the school bus. So people are following these women back into their homes and breaking in and following them in, and we're having altercations there. So it's a very different kind of need, a personal one, a very intimate one in that space that's supposed to be the safest. And it really is different all over the place, and different times of year manifest different conversations. It's also kind of wild to see which parts of the country love Glock, which parts of the country love SIG, who's the branding and where does it go? So that's been really fascinating. And it's also interesting to hear the similarities and the common threads. And that's the easy part. The harder part is to go to these different communities and then to interface with them and understand what they are and are not allowed to have, or are and are not allowed to do. And I'm preaching to the choir. This is the best audience for this. I don't have to ask you to care, because no one in the country cares as much as you do in California. The upsetting thing for me, especially after having the privilege of speaking at your gun ball a couple years ago, is to go elsewhere in the country and realize that they're ready to write off California and New York. Ignore you, forget that you're here, poo-poo you, and just pay attention to other things. And that's really disappointing. And it's very upsetting to me because I have a large student base in this area, and I know how hard you're fighting to maintain your rights. And I also know how enthusiastic you all are about having your firearms and going out and training and learning. And my passion is education, so you're my people. Right? So one thing that I would love to see happen, this community is thrived because you're not afraid of putting up a fight. You're not afraid of taking on the local community's attitudes and opinions. You're not afraid of gathering together and celebrating what you've accomplished, which is huge and immense. But I'd also like to ask you to turn your attentions outside your border. And what I'm asking you to do is to go on social media, on Facebook, and engage with different states' gun owners groups. Ask to participate. Join Maine gun owners, because the people in Maine need to know about what you're doing here. We only stand a chance to change their attitudes if they hear from you. They're sick of hearing from me, FYI, because I fight the fight every chance I get. But if they can hear from you, if they can hear what's going on, if they can understand how red flag laws here may be varying from the red flag laws we're facing in Maine, or how stand your ground right, which Maine just voted down. Very disappointed in that, very sad. We're constitutional carry, but we're one of the remaining 14 states, I believe, that does not have stand your ground. What are you doing? How are you fighting these battles? And they need to see who you are. They need to hear your voices. They need to see your face. They need to recognize the fact that there is a huge population here worth supporting. Because if we don't support New York, and if we don't support California, who has perhaps the most creative and well-funded anti-gun folks working tirelessly, it seems, to find new and creative ways to take our rights away, then the rest of us don't stand a chance. So I encourage you, I implore you to take the time and smash the keys and go make friends with folks from beyond, because we need to hear from you. They need to learn to care. I cannot impress that upon you enough. Again, the folks in Maine are like, fine, you're going to California again. I'm like, yeah, I am. It's great. They've got phenomenal tacos. Absolutely phenomenal tacos. So the message that we all have is that we're all fighting for our Second Amendment rights. We're all part of the right organizations. We're all part of the right communities. And we all love to shoot. So how many people in here have shot within the past month? All right, how about the past week? Who's going this weekend? That was a pretty good show of hands. This is fantastic. All right. Make sure you go, make sure you bring new people with you, share that experience, and do everything that you can to squash their misconceptions about who we are and what we are as a community. The only way we're going to do that is by having them experience us and not talk politics, but impress upon them that we are a community that is entrenched in safety and standards that are really high on the ethical level and how we engage with our gear. And then encourage them to come and experience shops like this that do a fantastic job, that have quality products on the shelves and outstanding people that run these organizations. And then slip in the Join San Diego County Gunners Association, right? Put the plug in there for them. Because unless we make those introductions, everyone thinks they're reinventing the wheel for the first time, and they're diving into the unknown thinking that the resources are not there, and they are. The infrastructure is here. So thank you all so much. It's a pleasure to see so many familiar faces, and I look forward to speaking with you individually when you come up and say hi. So thank you.
About someone doing something about it, it's not going to get any better.